Ahoy! The New World devs gave us a massive info dump on Season 10, both in a dev video and then in various responses across Discord and other places. So I'm going to try and summarize all of that in this video in a shorter form, and then in other videos I'll go into detail about the specific points separately. We're going to jump right into it, it's a lot, beginning with some of the progression changes. The first thing to know is Umbral Shards are coming back, so this will allow you to upgrade existing gear that is 700 gear score or higher to up to 800 gear score. This also means that some of the older gear is supposed to still feel viable. They mention particularly illegal set combos, so it can be worth upgrading some of your current gear. Artifacts can be upgraded in the same way, but they also say that some upgrades are traps and you don't necessarily want to upgrade everything. The cap of Umbral Shards has been increased to currently apparently 4,000 Umbral Shards, so you can store a little more. And you will be able to upgrade 5 items per week from 730 to 800 with a maximum of Umbral Shards, or 10 items to 790, or 15 items to 780. So the cost scales higher the gear score gets. Umbral Shards will drop from raids, elite chests, all PvP modes, catacombs, which we'll get to in a bit, and mutated expeditions. While they are limited to some degree, certain other things will no longer have raid limiters. For example, the raid no longer has a weekly drop limit, so every time you kill a boss in a raid, you can get 2 set items. The next point is Perk Charms, and before we get into that, a quick reminder to subscribe and click the bell if you want to see more info on all of this, because I'm gonna make separate videos where I will talk about things like Perk Charms in more detail, since it is pretty complex. If you want to get fresh early training tips, I'm going to post another one today. That is going to be on my Patreon, so feel free to support me there. So, for the Perk Charms, we have perk sockets on gear now, which is similar to gem sockets, and the perks you put in there can be switched out, allowing for more flexibility and customization. These perk charms are craftable, and you get the mats to craft them from a variety of existing content. Each recipe requires 3 materials from a total of 11 different ones, as well as chromatic seals. You can use your current chromatic seals, but they have also lowered the prices for them. 2,000 gold per chromatic seal now, with no weekly limit. Keep in mind that there are also other activities where chromatic seals drop, like for example raids. There are 3 types of charms: offensive charms, defensive charms, and skill charms, which are essentially ability perks. It is possible to roll the same socket twice on the same piece of gear, so you can for example roll 2 offensive slots. The 4 sockets that they mentioned in a previous article include gem sockets, so this would be 1 gem socket and then for example 2 offensive sockets and 1 skill socket. Currently, it's apparently not possible to get 4 ability offensive and defensive sockets total. There is going to be 1 gem socket in there. The only way to currently get a 4 socket item, not a 4 perk item, 4 socket item, is from mutation level 3, from M3s. You can craft 3 sockets, and you will find items with 3 sockets in the world. So that would be 1 gem socket and then 2 of the other perks. That said, thanks to the screenshot from the devs, we know that the new gear actually has 5 perk slots, just not 5 sockets. So one of them would end up being a normal perk regardless. If you're still confused, separate video for this is coming, but it's not quite as bad as some people thought it would be. And old gear will have the same amount of perks, but one of them will be a weakened perk, as far as I understand it. This is not the only option, and 4 sockets isn't necessarily best in slot, because there are also gear sets, which we'll get to, but they do say that maybe in some situations you might ignore sets in favor of 4 sockets from M3. They do say that generally you should expect to find 1 or 2 fixed perks on most items. The perks on these new charms that you can socket are different from the existing fixed perks and also different from infixes, which are yet another thing. The perk charms examples that we can see here are, for example, Bleeding Sweep 2, which is actually weaker than the current version because the duration is shorter, and Deadly Flourish 2, which has some amped up damage values. And Ainwin said on the Discord that you can kind of consider them a V2. We will see how they balance against the current perks and if the current perks are nerfed to offset some of that. Sets are the other new thing, not to be confused with our gear sets that you can just switch out, but they are set bonuses on gear, and that will allow you to unlock various perks depending on how many pieces you have. So some perks are, for example, unlocked at 2 pieces, some at 3 pieces, and sometimes even at 1. An example here is the Enrage set, which is basically some Berserker style build where you get more damage but less defense. You're flexible in which of your pieces you use for these set bonuses, and they also mentioned that at least for the Enrage set, this bonus will exist across all weapons, so you're not forced to use a specific weapon with this set. Now the gear sets seem to connect to Infixes as well. Infixes are really strong perks that can drop in certain areas of the game with those set pieces, sometimes on the set pieces themselves, and sometimes on normal gear with just sockets and no set bonus. I'm not entirely sure if all Infixes are connected to a set or if they can also function independently, but what we know about them is that they have certain unique effects. One that was mentioned here was that there's an Infix that somehow seems to work with the stacks of the Enrage set, where at the cost of some stacks, if you dodge, you can basically drop a mini grav well near yourself, some sort of gravity field that is pulling people in. And they made it sound like the Enrage stacks would be required for it, so I think it's connected to that set. They say this lets you mix and match sets with normal items, and sometimes the bonuses are on specific pieces only, like it could for example only be on a ring piece. It seems that Infixes take up an actual perk slot on a piece of gear. I'm not sure if that applies for set bonuses as well, or if they exist independently of the perks on the gear. But either way, it seems like there are situations where these perks might be very interesting for you, or others where the trade-off might not be worth it. Artifacts will also still have a role moving forward, and some of them are seeing changes. For example, Unmoved will now reflect some damage back, which I absolutely love because I just love the idea of Unmoved. And there are also some changes to artifacts that used to change the scaling of a weapon. Like for example, Life Taker, which can convert to Dex. That no longer has any focus scaling now at all, but now scales with int and dex equally. So not sure how the scaling values will be, but this sounds by itself pretty scary, honestly, considering this means a significant buff for musket Life Taker builds, which I would find concerning in a vacuum, but there's going to be so much more to this that kind of shuffles everything around, so I wouldn't worry too much yet. They also changed perks on artifacts. The final perk is now a socket. So the one that you would usually unlock beforehand is now a socket, so you can just switch it out easier as well. And that will replace the old perk that was there. So I'm assuming all of our current artifacts are just going to be switched over and lose their perks. Attributes also see a significant overhaul. They are now only gained through leveling and consumable foods. Our attribute total will be less than before. The numbers that we were told here was from around 735-ish to 530-ish. So this would allow for less DPS tank hybrid build. However, this is confusing because these are not the actual values. Finch looked into this a bit. I think the actual max value should be 665 at the moment, which likely means that the 735 value they're referring to was probably the hypothetical new attribute value you would have had at 800. So it's not exactly us losing 200 attribute points, but rather around 100. Or at least that is my understanding based on how things were worded, especially because he said that it's only going to be a little less attributes total. I feel like 200 attributes difference wouldn't have been a little less. But if you think that's gonna topple balance, then prepare for the next change. Scaling on all weapons has also been adjusted. All weapons that previously only had one attribute that they scaled with now have two. Those two have been adjusted in the amounts that they scale with. So previously we had 90% scaling for the main attribute and then 65% for the secondary. Now they have tiers. So S tier scaling is 91 to 100% scaling, and then according to what they said, it goes straight from S tier to B tier. There's no A tier apparently, and that would be 81 to 90.9-ish and so on. And the scaling actually goes lower than just those two tiers. So we have a screenshot, thankfully, and that shows us that there's also going to be E tier scaling, which, if we are following the same scale here, should be between 50 to 60% roughly. While we can't see all the change scalings, we can see that now Warhammer has Dexterity as a secondary scaling, and so does Firestaff, but the Dexterity scaling here is E, and I would assume it's similar for Warhammer, so pretty low. Which already opens up interesting options. For example, we could run a hatchet with a Warhammer better than before. On intelligence, we can also see that the life staff now secondary scales with intelligence, and so does the great axe. So we will likely see plenty of creative new weapon combinations. When it comes to crafting, a lot of that seems to revolve around the Perk Charms now. All of the Perk Charms are crafted, and you might get the rare drop they say, but it's pretty uncommon. Sometimes if you get a drop, it can be socketed in an item already, so you get the Perk Charm included with the item drop, or it can drop as the charm itself, but again, mainly from crafting. You need some amount of trade skill to craft these. You need 3 trade skills to craft all kinds of Perk Charms. For the offensive, the defensive, and weapon skill charm, they all need a different trade skill. The ones that were specifically pointed out already were weaponsmithing and armoring, so definitely worth leveling those a little bit at least if you haven't yet. And then there's going to be a third one. They haven't said which one. I'm gonna guess it's probably either jewel crafting or arcana. That would make most sense to me. They say this will funnel a lot of crafters into that loop. I would imagine it's basically the new matrix type of demand. However, you can also craft 3-socket items. We don't know much about that yet, but what we know is that matrices are required for this craft, said Joel, but also saying, if I recall correctly. So not 100% guaranteed, but likely. They don't mention a new crafting tier, but Ainwin did say that there will be new resources. This could just be referring to the resources used for the charms, or it could be an entirely new resource level. I don't know. No further details. I feel like if there was a massive trade skill increase and everything, they probably would have mentioned that. So it might just be similar to Mithril at best, maybe. Maybe not even like that. There are also some very important smaller changes. They did say that they're doing some balance on gems without specifying what exactly that will be, but that could have a big impact. Hearty will be removed. However, it's kind of still existing insofar that they will also slightly reduce dodge cost, so that in light and medium you will still have 3 dodges, and in heavy you will still have 2 dodges. They just taken out the Hearty perk from the ring, so it's going to be less mandatory, or not mandatory anymore. There is going to be a new Heartrune, Phantom Blades, which are these spinning swords, and there will be 3 versions of that. One that moves forward, one that kind of sticks to you. You can use it like in combination with Whirlwind was the example. And a third version that gives a sluggish effect to the enemy, which prevents them from dodging unless they attack you. And this lasts for 2 seconds, according to what we can find currently, but it seems like these Heartrunes have also been changed a little bit because one of them used to function differently in the past. There will be new chase rewards with a very low chance to drop in the raid. From the first boss, that is a really cool hat, they say. I'm assuming it's going to be somewhat related to that whole clown Joker theme that's going on there. From the second boss, there's going to be a spectral horse mount. And from the third boss, there's going to be another mount, quote, something that players are going to absolutely love, and in line with some of our more popular mounts. The most popular mounts that I can think of are the hippo and the turkey, so might be one of those. And these drops will actually be tradable too, which makes me think that this might be a farm avenue for those who want to spam the raid, since they have said there's no weekly limit on the drops. Just try and get the chase rewards to sell them. Coconuts and doubloons from the PvP zone will still exist, and you can upgrade any gear that's 700 plus to 800, but sounds like they're not going to play a major role. The PvP track will be seeing a large pass. There will be multiple sets on there, but also something that I predicted is going to happen. The whole track will be normalized from 1 to 200 roughly in rewards, so it's not so mid-loaded anymore. I actually have a video on that in the pipeline, might need to get that out quickly, so you know how to best farm if you still want to do that before the patch. Katie said the goal for endgame content is to move towards repeatable endgame content that has the opportunity to stay fresh with difficulty and reward chases. Might be a hint at maybe difficulty levels in the future, who knows. We are getting housing in the new zone, that's been confirmed now, and it's different, and somebody actually predicted this in my comment section, I think, because she said it's more like a haunted hotel, and the rooms are bigger than they appear, so you're not actually getting a house in that place, which could be cool. The customizable HUD has also been confirmed to still come in Season 10. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing and clicking the bell. Now, I am still going to cover the catacombs, the raid, and everything else in a separate video. I realize this is already 15 minutes at this point. I'd rather give you this info first because I know a lot of existing players care about that, and then we'll focus on the new stuff in a separate video, and then we still have the individual videos coming. So, more to come, probably later today or tomorrow. Look forward to that. For now, thanks to my patrons for supporting this video, and thank you for watching. SLOTH, out.